Welcome to the 3 reasons you don't look like you lift. Because that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about why you're going to the gym, you're seemingly putting in the effort, you're grinding away at the program. You picked off the workout from Muscle and Fitness or Women's Health from the magazine shelves. You flick through the pages, you looked at the hot bodies that were glistening and adoring every single one of those nice, smoothly created pages. And you're saying, I'm going to do that workout. I'm going to do what he said, what she said. I'm going to follow their program, their training routine. And 8 weeks down the line, did you get the ripped abs? Did you get the bulging bicep? Did you get the pert, peachy glutes? Maybe, maybe not. And if you didn't, and you're sat there thinking, well, why the hell do I not seem to be able to transform my body? Why, when I look at myself, even though I'm putting all this effort in over all these weeks, these months, these years even, why don't I look like I even lift? I look like I've never got off the chair of my office. I've never walked into a gym. I don't look like I've actually done anything, but I have. I've put in so much effort. I'm just not seeing the return. So if that's you, then I'm going to tell you right between the eyes, like a sucker punch on the tip of your nose, why you don't look like you lift. Because let's face it, you want to look like you lift, right? You want, if you're a guy, you want some guns. You want some pecs bursting through your t-shirt. You want to be able to strut down the street and say, and people say to you, hey dude, you been going to the gym? Well, yes, I have. I have been lifting for, only a few weeks, but yes, I do look massive. Now, you want that. And ladies, likewise, you want to be people paying you compliments saying, oh, wow, your butt looks great. It's so pert, it's so firm. Or, your triceps are looking so defined or whatever it is. You want those compliments. We all do. We all want to feel good about ourselves. And sometimes that comes from ourselves feeling good about what we see when we look in the mirror. But also, as much people say, it's not about what other people think, which is true. It definitely isn't about what other people think. But when you get a nice compliment, hell, that feels good, right? Feels like it was worth it. Now, what I'm going to do then is take you through what I feel are the 3 common reasons, the common mistakes that people make that basically means that they don't look like they lift. And we're going to go through those. And then I'm going to go through 4 reasons that are not why you don't look like you lift. So we're going to go through the counter argument as well. But first of all, we are going to start with these 3 mistakes that are stopping you from looking like you lift. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is technique. So I talked about on a previous episode that it's all about technique. And I gave you 4 tips to make the most amount of muscle possible. And that was going through the Iron Paradise fitness methodology of lift. And if you don't remember what that was, we'll just touch on it very, very briefly. It was L stands for lock it. So creating that stable platform for you to be able to perform an exercise A, safely, and B, accurately. So you want to lock that position in place, whether that's when you're bench pressing and you're putting those shoulder blades back, you're locking your scapula, your shoulder blades in place, never letting them move, make it locked in stone. And then you're creating that movement all with your chest muscles. So that's kind of that example there. Then we move on to I, which is intent. And this is super important when it comes to making sure that you're building muscle, whether you're a female and you want muscle tone, it's the same thing, let's be honest. Or whether you're a dude who just wants massive pecs and massive guns. Whether you want to be freaking Ron Burgundy and give everyone 2 tickets to the gun show, then you're going to have to do exercise correctly. And that comes with intent. And intent really is thinking about, well, what is this exercise supposed to be doing? And am I feeling it there? Now, I did a bit of a video for a client the other day, and we were talking about biceps. We're talking about how to effectively initiate a bicep curl. And it just seems really simple and really obvious to the average person. You just pick up a weight and you curl it. But actually, the reason why maybe you're not looking like you lift and you haven't maybe got, let's say in that example, the biceps that you crave is because you have just picked up that weight and just curled it. You've not really thought about the process and the technique that goes with that. So let's say, for example, we're doing a bicep curl. Now, a great bicep curl that you can do, a variation, is a preacher curl. Now, if anyone doesn't know what a preacher curl is, it's that bench looking thing that's got a like slight 45-degree-ish angle on it, and you kind of sit behind it, you hunch over the top, and then you basically curl at that 45-degree angle. That's a great exercise. We won't go into all the ramifications why that's a great exercise, but just assume that, let's basically take my word for it, it's a good damn exercise. Now, most people just sit there and they will just curl randomly. But what you need to do to make sure that you are getting the most out of any exercise, and in this specific case, this preacher curl, is you're getting that stable base. So when you're in that preacher curl, you're making sure that your upper arm, so you're like the back of your arm, your tricep from the point of the armpit that's locked in position over that bench, right down through to your elbow, is firmly planted into that pad, because that is going to enable you to generate force, and the force is going to come through the bicep once you're in that position. And I used like to think about two other examples of why creating that stable base is important. Now, you can think about it in terms of a bench press and in terms of a leg press as well. So in terms of a bench press, imagine how much weight you could lift if there was no bench. If you had to get yourself into that sort of bench press position in some way, shape or form, but there was no pad on your back, how much weight could you lift? Fucking nothing. Because it's the opposing force of the bench and the stability of the bench that allows you to create the force with your chest. And similarly, if you've got a 45-degree leg press where your back is against the pad and you're pushing your feet out at a 45-degree angle, again, if that back pad wasn't there, how much force could you generate with your quads? Not a lot, because you'd have to be propping yourself up with your core. You have to, keeping yourself upright. You haven't got that back pad to create some opposing force into. And again, that's why the stability is important. So it's thinking about what exercises are you selecting so that you have the most opportunity to create that opposing bracing force. So for example, you could argue that a standing bicep curl is less of a good exercise for building biceps than a preacher curl, because the preacher curl offers you that extra bit of stability and that extra bit of bracing. Okay, so from that point then, you're braced into this preacher curl, and now you're going to initiate. So you're at the bottom of the movement, your arm is virtually outstretched. Now what happens here is you curl. But before you even curl, what you need to do is start to think about the muscle that you're working, because you don't want to have any guesswork in this process. You don't want to curl and use a lot of shoulder movement and sort of a swinging motion, because you are just guessing. You are just guessing that the bicep is going to work at some point within that movement. And guesswork never got you anywhere. So what you need to do is, in that extended position, you're in this preacher curl, your arms outstretched, is now you want to start tensing that bicep as hard as humanly possible. So you're creating that intent. You're creating tension and intent in that muscle, so that now your brain is transfixed on that particular muscle, and that particular muscle making that movement and initiating that movement from day one. So now when I've got that tension created in the bicep, now I start to move the weight, and I maintain that tension and even try to increase that tension as much as possible. Now you can already see, if you just do this while I'm talking through it, if you just sit there and with your arm outstretched, start tensing your bicep. Now start to actually contract your bicep and start to tense your bicep even more. You can actually make that really quite a painful and quite an intense contraction. You've got to then be doing the same when you've got a weight in your hand. Often people, when they put the weight in their hand, because it gets difficult, they try to make it easier. So they compensate by using a lot of shoulder movement. They compensate by trying to throw the weight up quickly. But again, you're back to guessing. You're guessing if you're using your bicep to actually move that particular muscle. And then on that particular exercise, there's some other little technique tips you can use. Like you might want to supinate your wrist a bit further, i.e. that's kind of twist the bicep, the dumbbell to the side. That creates an additional contraction at the top of the bicep curl. That would be a great movement. There's other things like for bench pressing, when you're pressing up, you can then start to try and physically bring your hands together. That opposes the gravitational forces trying to push your hands out and creates even more tension. So that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to create this process where every part of the rep, every rep is difficult. Every part of that rep creates more and more tension in that muscle. And before you start every single rep, you are using intent. You are understanding what muscle is going to move that weight, and you're creating that tension and then moving that weight through that particular motion. So intent is hugely important, and it's something that is often overlooked because people just want to look good in the gym. If it's, this goes for the ladies out there who, you strap that ankle weight, that ankle cuff on the cable machine around your ankle, and you just kick that thing out like you're trying to, I don't know, donkey kick some dude in the balls who stood behind you, and you're doing it with such sort of like swinging motion and force that actually you're using a lot of back, you're using lots of other different muscles that you actually don't want to use. If you just stood there perfectly still, rock solid, as we talked about stability, you took rock solid and you said, right, now before I initiate this movement, I'm going to contract my glutes. I'm going to really squeeze my ass as hard as I possibly can. And only when I've reached that point of contraction, then I'm going to move that weight. Then I'm going to move my leg out in a controlled manner and then keep that constant tension within my glute. You will find that will exponentially improve how much muscle you build and how good your glutes end up being. You will have the pertest and most rock solid backside you've ever seen, and you don't need no Kim Kardashian style implants for that. There's a freebie. So technique is a huge thing, but it's not just about how to move the exercise, it's how you think about the muscle, it's how you think about moving that exercise, and it's making sure you're doing that all the time. Now this can be quite a new thing for you to learn, but it does get quicker. It's like it will come to a point where this is just second nature. You don't even think about it, it just happens. But early on, you're going to have to start thinking about these things a little bit more. As we move through that lift process, we talk about force. So you're generating force. You're trying to generate as much force as possible. And then the last bit is the T, which is the tension and the tempo. So we've already talked a lot about tension. Tempo just being a way, especially for someone who's new to this process, to create that tension. It's an easy way to do it. So for example, if I said in that little glute kick thing that I want you to take 2 seconds to bring that foot up in that 45-degree angle behind you, and I want you to have 3 seconds down, it forces you to create tension because you have to go slow. If I said, just kick that as hard as you can, you just, and you'd use any muscle possible to kick it. So that's what you need to do. Focus in on the muscle and focus in on what you need to do for that particular exercise. And that's the first fundamental reason why you don't look like you lift. So if you're a dude, that's why you don't have a good set of arms. That's why you don't have the perfect set of pecs, not pets, pecs. And that's for a lady, why you haven't got the glutes, why you haven't got the defined shoulders and all these sorts of things. If you don't look like you lift, first primary reason is because you are not lifting correctly. Sort that out, and I guarantee you, even if some of the other things aren't optimized, you will still make progress. So first things first, get your technique right. Second thing is effort. Everyone says, I train hard. Not true. Some people do. I won't knock it. If you are someone who said, oh, I train hard, I train fucking hard. Okay, some people do train hard, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people say they train hard, but actually they don't. And I guarantee you 100%, and I would argue the toss with anybody who says differently, is that you will always train harder with someone else who knows what they're doing. 100%. And that goes for me. I train on my own all the time. But I know I would train harder if there was somebody else there with me to push me a bit further, to spot me through a few additional reps, to do some negatives, to really kind of push me beyond what I am capable of doing on my own. That is just fact. And if you think that that's not possible, then I think you're an egotistical maniac. And I don't want anything to do with you. So you'll always push a little bit harder. So does that mean you have to go out and get a personal trainer? Does that mean you have to go out and get a coach? Does it mean you have to go out and get a gym buddy? Of course not. But you have to then realize that there is a little bit of effort you're leaving on the table. And that's cool. You can still make progress, do it training on your own. Clearly, I do. Clearly, my clients do that don't have gym partners and things like that. All 100% possible. So there's that. You have to understand that you could always push yourself a little bit further, a little bit harder. The other thing is that when you're training on your own, you really have to get into almost like a mental place where you can push yourself as hard as you want to, as hard as you need to, as hard as you can. Some people will back off when something feels difficult, when something feels like they're feeling that pain in the muscle, and you've almost got to have like this light bulb moment in the sense that you search for that pain. Now that sounds like some sort of sadist. I promise I haven't got a gimp dungeon in my basement, in my cellar. There is no sex dungeon. There is no sex swing. There is no dude in a gimp mask in a chest. And I do not know anybody called Z who rides a motorcycle. So what I'm saying is that you have to seek that pain. You have to seek that feeling of that muscle being cramped and contracted and a little bit of uncomfortableness. You've got to be happy to go and seek that. You have to be happy to go to that place of effort where you really take that and actually feel that happen. And one of the, a quick and easy example I can give you of that is, we used the bicep example before. Now you can start to feel that bicep without any weight. You can also, if you've got very good connection with your back muscles, like your lat, you can actually pull down the lat like this and basically just pull your lat down and contract that as hard as possible. And you can actually make that hurt by just basically pulling your arm down towards your body and then just trying to imagine you're trying to get your elbow into the center of your back, like a bullseye into the middle part of your lower back. If you pull your arm down like you were doing a lat pull down, and then you try and get your elbow into the center of the bottom of your back, you will create a big lat contraction. And if you just then feel that point where you feel, oh, that feels a bit tough. And then you think, right, now that's the point where you contract more. Now that's not the point where you back off and say, oh, that hurts. It's where you go, right, I found that point. Now I know my muscle's working. Now I go even harder into that position. That's the different sort of mentality you have and you need to have if you want to get the most out of your training. A lot of people will feel that and back away, almost like it's not quite fight or flight response, but it's similar, where essentially you feel the pain, you back off. Obviously, if you've got like a bad pain, like a joint pain or something like that, that's completely different. But here in this scenario, you've got to be almost like sadistic and go for that and then squeeze it and then feel that and then contract harder, and really go for that. And one of the things that I've picked up from guys like Joe Bennett, Ben Pakulski, is that this kind of notion that you hang out where it's most difficult. So where an exercise is at its hardest, that's where it's worth spending a few extra seconds. So in that example, when I'm pulling like a lat pull down, I'm pulling a bar down in front of my chest. If I'm then trying to squeeze my lat by hitting my elbow into the small of my back, that's now at the point where it's its hardest. If I spend a couple of seconds there, especially under load with some weight, that's going to be much more beneficial because I'm making that muscle work so much harder. So wherever you're planning your exercises, whatever exercises you're selecting, when you're thinking about those exercises, think about, well, where is this exercise at its most hardest? And I'm going to spend a little bit of time there contracting, making that muscle work, making it difficult, making sure you're getting the most out of every individual rep. So if you then combine those first two things, technique and effort, they are two of the fundamental things that people lack and why they don't look like they lift. bro. So yes, I would start there. Technique and effort. Get real with yourself. Am I putting in as much effort as I possibly could? Could I have eked out one more rep? Could I have, and again, it's not just about more weight, more reps, more sets. It's about technique PBs as well. If you can say, well, I didn't manage to lift more weight, but I definitely felt that more in that muscle. That's great. That's an improvement. That's a technique PB. You should be always looking for those. And then the third element of the reason why you don't look like you lift is your nutrition. Because if you can do all the training in the world, but training only creates the opportunity for your body to change. Without proper nutrition, especially around protein, you are not going to make the progress that you need to make. That's just harsh fact. So make sure that you've got these two elements of the puzzle going hand in hand. You want to make sure that, yes, I'm training. I've got my technique, I'm putting in the effort. And on the other side, you're putting an equal amount of effort into maximizing your nutrition. And if we specifically talk about protein for a second, there are some simple guidelines that you can follow to maximize protein intake. Because you'll hear me say, a lot of people say, that it doesn't necessarily matter what time you have your meals. It doesn't necessarily matter how many meals that you have throughout the day when you are trying to lose body fat. Now that's 100% true, 100% true. However, when it comes to building muscle, it does matter. So when your primary goal is to build some muscle, it does matter the frequency at which you have specifically protein. Now, the reason for that is that the protein, basically the muscle building process, is driven by something called muscle protein synthesis. Posh term, so let's bring it back down to what it really fucking means. Muscle protein synthesis is the building of new muscle. That's basically what it is. And that's what we want. We've gone to the gym, we trained our ass off, we listened to what this fucking crazy Englishman with stupid long hair said, and we worked on our technique, we worked on our effort. Now we want to build muscle. That's what we want to do. So muscle protein synthesis is what you want to do. Having protein and in your diet basically stimulates that process. And therefore, something within protein called leucine, which is an amino acid within protein, is basically one of the key ingredients for actually making that muscle protein synthesis process start. That's why you basically have protein, and you want to be stimulating that process multiple times throughout the day, ideally 4 to 6 times throughout the day. Now, here's some general rules that you can follow. So obviously most people will say, again, like if you look at my infographics and you look at some of the articles I've written and podcasts I've recorded, I will tell you that it's anywhere between 1.8 grams to 2.7 grams per kilo of protein per day. And that's right. Now you might be saying, well, okay, now you're saying that for building muscle specifically, there's an optimal way and an optimal frequency to have that protein. So how do you break that down? Well, realistically, there's only a couple of things that you need to think about, really, again, in practical terms. The first of all is you want to have 2 to 3 protein meals that are about 0.4 or say 0.3 to 0.5 grams of protein per kilo. Now, they are, roughly speaking, probably going to be your main meals. So either a breakfast, lunch, and a dinner, or a lunch and a dinner, depending on what sort of strategy you're following. Now, the reason for that is that most of those meals will be what we call mixed protein sources. So it's not like a whey protein shake where the protein is coming from the whey protein powder only. You're going to have maybe some chicken, you maybe have some lentils or whatever it is that's going into that meal that are going to provide different sources of protein. Now, because then the leucine content of that protein may be different and the profiles may be different depending on what meal you're actually having, if you just err on the side of caution and have more protein, so i.e. that 0.3 to 0.5 grams per kilo in that meal, then you should hit the leucine amount you need to help build new muscle, which is great. Then you probably want to have a recovery shake. And again, you're probably in the sort of 0.2 to 0.3 grams per kilo, because most of you are going to pick a whey protein shake, high in leucine, don't need so much of it. So therefore, that's going to be a great recovery shake. And then an optimal way to set up your diet would be to have a larger portion of protein, maybe some casein protein, which is basically like, just think like Greek yogurt, later in the evening pre-bed. So something more like 0.5 to 0.6. And then if you add up all of those different 0.6, 0.3, 0. Whatever, is you will get to 1.8, 2 grams per kilo. So that's how you can break that down into specific meals. So actually, in reality, for most people, that's not going to be any change to your current diet, really, to optimize your protein intake, because you're probably having lunch, dinner, a post-workout shake. Maybe then you just need to add in that pre-bed protein to be optimal. But again, we're talking about being optimal here. Not everybody needs to be optimal. Not everybody wants to be optimal, and not everybody has to be optimal. So even if you didn't follow those guidelines, would you still build muscle? Will you still look like you lift? Yes. But if you wanted to optimize it and say, I really want to make the most out of my training, I'm busting my ass in this gym, so I'm damn well sure going to make sure that I'm actually getting all of the benefit from doing so. So if you do that, then follow those guidelines and you will optimize your training. Now I'm going to give you a bonus fourth. The other reason why you don't look like you lift is because this shit takes time. So if you have ever seen any of my transformation pictures, you'll see one that shows me 9 months after I started, and I look pretty good. I don't like to boast, but I do look pretty good. And so that's 9 months. And a lot of that is to do with muscle memory. So when I was in my 20s, I went to the gym. I got to like 90 odd kilos. I then had a 5-year break from training, and I went cycling. I lost 20 kilos, etc. Then I went back to the gym and I put on muscle quite quickly through muscle memory. So that is a thing. So like my 9-month transition, it would maybe take someone else a bit longer to actually achieve that result. Then you look at the picture where I'm very shredded. If you've ever seen that on my website or you've seen that on my social media, is that took 2 years. So this stuff didn't happen in a 12-week transformation. This stuff didn't happen in even a year. This took 2 years of doing the same thing every week, is being really diligent with nutrition, being diligent with my weightlifting regime and things like that. And even then, I wasn't the best in terms of technique in those early days. That's something I've learned much more recently. So, if you follow these guidelines and these examples, your process will be much, much better. So I would say that time and patience is another reason, is that, maybe you don't look like you lift because you haven't given it long enough, I would say. And don't get suckered into the magazines that say ripped abs in 8 weeks, or t-shirt busting arms in 4 weeks. It's probably not going to happen. So just bear that in mind, that this stuff is going to take time. It's going to take patience. Then we're going to talk about now is what this hasn't really got that much of an impact. So the things that you think might be reasons why you don't look like you lift, but are actually not. So the first of those is sets and reps. Most people will have this question when they start on a training program. How many reps should I do? How many sets should I do? If I look on my favorite website of all, Quora, it's filled with those questions of how many reps should I do to build muscle? How many sets of this exercise do I need to get the most amount of muscle? The answer is, it doesn't really matter that much. There's a couple of basic principles that you need to follow, but most of you will be doing those anyway, and it's just about application of that. So in terms of reps, you can train anywhere, I'd say between 4 and 30 repetitions per set and still make gains. And that is on the assumption that your effort is the same, whatever rep range you pick. Now, obviously, it's a very broad range, but there are some logical things that you can do. So I would say like heavy exercises where you can lift a lot of weight, if you're doing it correctly with the technique, then slightly lower reps may be advantageous. I personally don't do anything really over 12 to 15 repetitions, just because I find it very difficult to concentrate on muscle contractions and getting the most out of every exercise for that period of time. So I'd never really do 30 reps unless I was doing some sort of metabolic type burnout type of thing. So yeah, find the rep range that works for you for that exercise and go with that. In terms of sets, you're just making sure that you are increasing training volume over time. So if that means that you are adding an extra set, Maybe you do 6 weeks of one sort of style of program, then you add a set for another 6 weeks. That's adding training volume. So again, it doesn't hugely matter, especially if your technique's not right. You can do as many shit reps as possible. Is pointless. So that would what I would be called junk volume. If you have not got your technique right, you've not got the effort right, then adding more reps and more sets is just adding wasted volume into your program. Come back, and if you did less sets and less volume, but really targeted on technique and effort, you will get more progress. I guarantee it. Another one that the reason why you're not looking like you lift is nothing to do with this, is the type of protein powder. Again, protein powder isn't magic. So whether it's a whey isolate, whether it's a concentrate and all this sort of stuff, it really doesn't make a huge amount of difference. Just find a protein powder that you enjoy, go with that, and fill your boots from there. Generally speaking, most people will go with a whey protein powder. I think it's a little bit in terms of has a slight extra benefit, but it also in terms of in terms of gut health type issues, I think there's less of an issue with sort of whey isolate powders. But again, it comes down to you and your financial situation and what you can afford and what you want to pay for protein. You don't even have to have protein. You can have regular food if you want to. The next one is exercise selection. Now, I say exercise selection, but it matters a bit. Exercise selection matters a bit. Now, where I was coming from here was when you're selecting various different exercises for your training program, yes, it matters. Yes, it matters. But most people, if I got you to do a bicep curl versus a preacher curl, as long as the technique and the effort was right, the difference is minimal. There's a slight advantage, in my opinion, to a preacher curl in that situation, but it is minimal. And that's where I think people get too hung up and too caught up in knots about exercise selection that it actually prevents them from really thinking about what they need to do. It prevents them from coming back to basics and actually applying themselves and getting good results, because they're too worried about all this extraneous stuff that at this stage doesn't matter a huge amount. And that probably leads me on to the final point, which is about you feel like you haven't got the best training program. So you feel like it's the training program that's let you down. You feel like you need the new training program that Muscle and Fitness have just released, or you need the training program that, I don't know, Henry Cavill had in Superman, or whatever that dude's name is that is Aquaman. You want his training program because that must be the best training program if he looked like that. Actual fact, like the guy that has technique and effort nailed, like is a 9 out of 10 on all those different sorts of things or more, is going to make way more progress on a shit program than the dude that's got the perfect training program but sucks at technique and fucking puts in no effort. So the best training program, quote unquote, is only good if you've got all of the other component parts in place. If you're nailing technique, you're nailing effort, you are nailing nutrition, a great training program is going to be fucking awesome for you. If you're shit at technique, you're shit at putting in effort, and you're shit with your nutrition, forget the training program. Go back to square one and sort out those fundamentals first. So that concludes the 3 reasons you don't look like you lift: technique, effort, nutrition. And the bonus one, time and patience. So I hope you found this useful. And before you go and before you disappear, I want to tell you about a Kickstarter pack that I've got available for you so that you can start to put some of these component parts into place, because that's the key thing. You want some practical information you can take away and apply yourself. So within the notes of this, you can find a link to a free training program. This is a 4-week training program for the beginner. So if you've got less than 2 years experience in the gym, this is going to be perfect for you. This training program, or this 4 weeks, is an element of a training program that I use within my Total Body Blueprint program. Now, over the course of that 4 weeks, it's about learning technique. It's about learning movement patterns and honing those over time, so that when you progress into the latter stages of that program, you have technique really, really well honed, and you can start to push more intensity and different exercises through a well-honed and well-established foundation. So you can download that for free. What else I'm going to send you is a guide on how to calculate your calories and your macros so that you can start to, again, get that nutrition side of things sorted. That will come on day 2. Then I'm going to send you a guide on how to combat your cravings, because a lot of you will have issues with cravings, maybe overeating if you're trying to lose a bit of body fat. So we're going to actually help you sort out those cravings. On top of that, I'm going to send you recipe packs. I'm going to send you a guide on how to live leaner at work and a bunch of other cool stuff. So this is like a Lean Life Kickstarter Pack. And I want to send you it for free. All you need to do is click that link, pop in your email address, and then boom, it will land in your inbox. And then you will have that to kickstart your little transformation. And also, you'll get access to the Lean Lifers Fat Loss and Fitness Facebook group as well. So you can come and ask me a bunch of questions as you go through that program. You can ask me a bunch of questions. I'll help you out. I'll guide you through that process so that over 4 weeks, you can really get a good kickstart. Will you get ripped abs in 4 weeks? Nope. Will you get t-shirt busting arms in 4 weeks? Nope. But you will get the foundations in place for long-term success. So just click that link, go and get that. It's all free. Why the hell wouldn't you? Just go and get it. Now, all that's left for me to say is keep living the lean life, and I'll see you for the next one. And if you want to come and chat to me and talk to me about maybe where you're at right now with your goals and maybe some tips you want from me, and maybe even ask me a question that then transforms itself into another episode of this, then the best place to come and find me is on Instagram at iron_paradise_fitness. Drop me a DM, say hi, say you listen to this, say you watch this, and I'll gladly have a little bit of backwards and forwards messaging with you to help you out on your fitness journey. But for now, keep living that lean life, and I'll see you soon for the next one.